You're listening to Stimulus Tech Talk, a conversation-based podcast created by Stimulus Technologies that covers a range of topics related to business and technology.
Hello and welcome to Stimulus Tech Talk. I'm Nathan Whitaker, CEO of Stimulus Technologies, and I'm very excited to have Mark Wilder join us today for our podcast to talk about marketing and technology and business leadership. Welcome, Mark. I'm excited to have you.
Oh, thanks, Nathan. I'm excited to be here.
So Mark is the creative director of Wilder 2 Agency. He is an award-winning marketing executive with over 25 years of experience leading marketing teams and projects across music products, software education, consumer electronics, and financial services industries. Wilder 2 was started in 2012 as phase 2 of his career. As a client-side marketer, he saw a need for an agency that would partner with marketing teams to add resources, execution, and expertise. Mark is a creative, planning, and messaging leader. He has led the branding, advertising, communication, and marketing of dozens of brands and hundreds of products over his career. When he's not marketing, he's a music producer specializing in compositions for film, TV, and advertising. With that kind of background, we're really excited to hear more about you. So, is there anything that you want to fill in on your bio after I read that?
No, it sounds pretty good, actually.
It's always interesting to hear your bio read like, oh, yeah, that's got to be.
Yeah, no, it's definitely me. What I think is kind of fascinating is when I have an opportunity with clients to bring my music experience into the marketing. And that happens more with music products, obviously, that brands that I've worked with that do music products. But I'm always looking for an opportunity to kind of have the marketing and the music kind of come together in some way, because I think a lot of brands can benefit from the authenticity of like a singer-songwriter who's also, using one of their products or something. So I think it's always just kind of a interesting puzzle to try to figure out, like, how could we do this and bring some authenticity to the brand?
I'm going to diverge from our questions just because you brought the music portion of it up. I think in marketing, historically, we think about jingles as a big
Right.
part of marketing, and maybe it's not so much anymore. But there's so many jingles when I was growing up that I still remember that were part of marketing. And is
Yeah.
that what we're talking about, music, or is it a little bit different than that too?
Well, it can be that, and I've done a little of that, but it's um, that I would consider more like almost like sonic branding. Although jingles, sonic branding. There's lots of different ways to talk about it in the vernacular. But what's typical today, of course, is particularly with advertising, a brand will want a specific type of song or a sound to go in their commercials or in their videos. And when I have the opportunity, I make music that suits them for that. And I have over the years, had music on television a lot. I have music on television every day on Fox Sports. And so I'm always kind of, again, sort of bringing those worlds together whenever I can. But it's not for everybody. It doesn't work for everybody. And for those that it doesn't, I leave that, on the side, and we focus on digital or whatever, they need us to do.
How does music work today? You mentioned digital in the digital space that we're in. I think, if you look at TikTok and some of these platforms that really do incorporate music into, the TikTok videos and things like that. But how does it work for marketers to incorporate music and sound into their marketing and advertising?
Well, it's kind of interesting because we probably don't pay a lot of attention to it when we're consuming the media, unless it's social media. When the music is the focus, like you mentioned, TikTok. But if we were just watching television or watching Netflix or whatever, you might not notice how much music there actually is. But there actually is a lot. And if you've ever watched your television with the sound off, you know how boring it can be to have just the visual. Music brings the emotion. And one of the things that I have specialized in is try to find, the palette for the brand, to try to figure out what is it that the brand sounds like, and a part of that is also the demographic. Who are they trying to appeal to? So there's a wide variety of musical styles that can be incorporated into a brand campaign, and a lot of that has to do with what demographic are they trying to reach. But there's all sorts of things. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the Target ad that's using a very old song from the 60s, that's just got this kind of psychedelic vibe to it. And the ad is very bright. It's all shot outdoors. It's looks like it's selling swimsuits, beach attire, beach toys, and so forth and so on, which of course is available at Target. But yeah, music and branding, it's actually a really interesting piece of marketing. And it tends to be larger brands, right, who have larger budgets, who can afford to do the kinds of things that we're talking about. But I just did a project for a company not that long ago where we shot a video all at a concert venue here in Seattle, and it was for, again, a music product. It's a product used to make music, so it makes sense to do that. But really, it could be anything. I mean, again, music is everywhere, and it adds so much to the visual. It's extremely important. And anytime we do video projects for any client, we're always talking about, well, what music should go here? What style should it be?
That's really interesting because I've done that periodically, is just thinking about, watching a movie, watching a show, and the tone that the background music, because there's always seems to be something going on in the background as far as sound, and how that changes the emotion of it. And so, we don't think about that, as especially small business marketers, to incorporate
Right.
that sound. But I think that's good advice for all of us to think about what that means and how to set a tone for our entire company. So I
Yeah,
appreciate.
no, it's a real thing. And I always say, if you want to be one of the big boys, think like one of the big boys, right? So it's a very important part of your overall brand marketing. Like, even a small business that's making a video, maybe the founders on the video, and they're doing something where they're just introducing their product or their service or whatever, the music can really make a big difference, or no music at all. But if you and the other thing is, it's very easy to get good music. There's plenty of good music out there. It's not something that's all that expensive to get, and the artist gets paid a little bit for it, which is always nice. So there's lots of ways to incorporate it into your strategy if you choose.
Yeah, I know this is not a marketing thing, but I got an advertisement a year or so ago, to have a custom song written
Uh-huh.
for my wife, for our anniversary.
Uh-huh.
And it was a few $100s to have
Mhm.
a custom song written. I picked an artist out, from this website, and that was like really impactful to her and to our anniversary, of just having this short little, 1.5 minute, 2-minute song. And you just, don't think about these things where music can set the tone for everything. And uh, custom songs are still out there.
Oh,
to be
absolutely. I have many friends who do it on multiple platforms. It's a thing, and it's really nice, because it is special. It's unique, and in your case, it really shows that you were thinking about your wife. And I'm sure you met with the songwriter and told her or him some things that were special about your wife, and things that had happened in your time together, and they turned it into a song, right? So it's pretty special.
So how does it work for small business? If you wanted a song or background music or something like that, is there, certainly, we always concern ourselves about copyright
Mhm.
violations and things like that. How do you get custom music, or at least license that music that works for a business, to incorporate in advertising and marketing?
Well, it's actually really easy. All you have to do is license the music, And if you do that properly, then you'll never have a problem with copyright or anything like that. It's when you use music that you don't have permission to use that you can get into trouble. So, for example, if you wanted to use Taylor Swift, as background music for your ad or your promotional video or whatever, that would be a big no-no, and you probably would have some trouble with that eventually. I wouldn't suggest doing that. But what you can do is you can, if you really like, just to use this as an explanation, if you really, really wanted that sound, but you didn't want to pay, obviously couldn't afford to pay the money that Taylor Swift would require you to pay, you could approach either a company that does custom work, or you could approach someone like me. And I have lots and lots of songs that sound like Taylor Swift would maybe perform them, or maybe they would be on a playlist with Taylor Swift. I have a lot of artists that I work with that can do that type of sound. So that's one way to do it. And another way is to use a music library. There's tons and tons of them out there, and you could just go to the music library, type in keywords Taylor Swift, and then you would get a whole bunch of music that you could choose from. And that's for everything, not just Taylor Swift. It could be any artist that you want. It could be any type of music you want. If you said, I want hip hop, I want rock, I want jazz, whatever it is, if you go to a music library, then you can license an individual track for a very small amount of money in the scheme of things. And it's all, the libraries all make it very easy for you, because they kind of like photo stock libraries. There's a fee for usage, and you license the music for a certain period of time, and you tell them what you're doing and how big is the usage. Is it going to be international? Is it going to be national? Is it going to be regional? And all these things affect the price. But when it comes to that, I highly recommend you, all businesses, no matter how large they are, how small, when they're using music, go and do it the right way. You'll avoid a lot of trouble, and there's a level of integrity there too. The artists that make this music, they're in business too, and they work with these publishers, these music libraries, and they're in business too. So let's all support each other in our business endeavors, and make sure that the people that are involved are compensated appropriately for it.
It's interesting, just speaking of this licensing. So one of the sides of our business is we provide phone service, voice over IP phone service. And when I started getting into that business 20 some odd years ago, quickly learned about licensing of on hold music was a big
Yeah,
deal. And found that a lot of companies were plugging in a radio into their phone system and rebroadcasting radio signals, and that's actually illegal to
it
do.
is. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're not supposed to do that.
yeah. So, and then we found that there's free content music that you could do. That was there was a certain number of songs that were generated that were open source and free to use, but then there was these content libraries that you could buy, some custom music, and it wasn't that expensive. And we always encouraged our clients to pay the licensing and get something a little bit better for their on hold music. But it's
Well, yeah, I
interesting.
mean, we've all been on hold and said, God, this music is terrible, right? I mean, it's happened, many, many, many times to all of us. So why not have a good experience? And I think, again, if I'm going to have to sit and wait, for customer service, I should at least have a pleasant experience while I'm waiting. And I think that's very, very smart that you recommended that. And I hope most of your customers took you up on it.
Yeah, we have quite a few that do, and it's an opportunity to market too
Mhm.
on the during the on hold. And I think it's funny. What you want the most is to say, a client to say, "Hey, can you put me back on hold? I really like the song I was listening." Something that
I've
happens.
done that. I've done that. Oh, I really liked that. Sorry you came on at this moment. Yeah, that's happened. We should talk about the positives, right, as well as the negatives. Sometimes the hold music is really good.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you broke out from the corporate career and started your agency. Kind of talk to me about your transition from being in a corporate environment to running your own agency. How did you start? Why did you do it? And what was the transition like for you?
So it's interesting. When I was working for other companies, I always treated my brand like a client. So whoever my boss was, if my boss was the president of the company, SVP, whatever their title was, I always treated him like a client. And I always thought about the team that I was leading as an internal agency. So that was my leadership style. I always like talked about, this is how we approach it. And it was a little bit of a transition when I first did that. That was a number of jobs before I started my own shop. And it took a little while for the people working for me to kind of get it. And the reason I understood is because back when I lived in New York in the 90s, I did temp work and freelance work for agencies, and I sort of understood how that worked. And that's actually how I got my start in marketing. Was I did copywriting for some ad agencies in New York. And so I learned, that sort of ethos working at these different spots. And, I think the big deal with internal marketing teams, if they can get to that agency mentality, is that it's a combination of things, right? So you're there to serve, but you're also there to advise. And it can be a real tricky tightrope to walk to go to your boss and say, this idea that you have is actually not a very good marketing idea, and here's why. And I've had those difficult conversations in the past. And the best thing that you can do is just say, I have another solution for you, and here's what it is. But as far as like, how did I know it was time to go and start this? I always felt like I really wanted to focus on creativity, and I always wanted to focus on results. And I felt like, at least with the companies I was working for, there was a lot of process, and there was a lot of, you have to do it this way. You have to go through these steps in order to get something done. And I always felt a little restrained by that. And I always wanted to work where I was making the client come first and embracing technology. And in 2012, when I started Wilder 2, a lot of things didn't really exist yet. Or if they did, they were nascent technologies, things that we take for completely for granted now, like Zoom or like a StreamYard, which is what we're using right now. Those technologies had just started. People were using Skype, but Skype wasn't very good in those days. So there was just a lot of opportunity that I saw around embracing technology, kind of flattening everything out, and really embracing strategy and creative in a way that supported internal teams. Because that was the other thing with Wilder 2, we had all been client-side marketers, and we saw that there was a real need for marketing teams to have additional resources when they needed them. So it made financial sense to have us as opposed to an employee who you might not be able to keep busy all the time. And maybe you even looked for work for, oh, we have that person sitting at that desk. What can they do, right? As opposed to, oh, we can hire this agency to come in and do X, Y, and Z for us, pay them a fee. There's no benefits costs. There's no 401k. There's none of that stuff. It's just a flat fee. They do the work. When the work's done, we're done with them unless we have more work for them. And interestingly enough, that's usually how we got more business. Was we would do well. We would do it at the price we said we would do it. We would do it in the timing we said we would do it. And then they would say, well, can you do this? And then we would say, well, actually, we can do that. So I really wanted to do that part of it. And I just felt like it was time. I was just at that part of my career where I was like, I really want to try this. I want to see if I can do it. I had asked people in my industry, which was music products, do you think this industry would support an agency like that? And a lot of trusted people that I went to, and everyone said, oh my gosh, Mark, if you did that, you would be successful. I know you would be. So I know it was a gamble, but I thought, I'm going to give it a shot and see how it goes. And here we are 12 years later. 13 years later.
It's a scary thing to go out on your own because, as I learned too, going out on my own and starting Stimulus, you are the boss. You have to be the one
Mhm.
who knows everything, and it's always a challenge to, set the direction and be the one that everybody looks to have all the answers and do the right things, from your team to your clients, everybody's looking to you. So you mentioned something, as you were talking along, that things in marketing have changed, obviously, through technology over the last 13 years. Uh, and there's a deluge, I think, of supposed marketing tools and help for small to mid-sized businesses today. What are some of the essential things that a small business should be looking at today from a marketing tool, or things that they should be doing, that are essential to the marketing success of their business?
Well, I think the number one thing is a CRM. I think the CRM is, for the marketing department, should be kind of the central hub of how they do work. It's just so important. And we use HubSpot. Speaking of hubs, we use HubSpot both with our internal work and also with our client work. And it's just so valuable. The amount of information and data that you're going to get from a good CRM like HubSpot is something that's going to drive your marketing decisions. It takes a lot of the guesswork out. When I started, and maybe when you did too, Nathan, you did a lot of things and you really didn't know what was effective. In fact, I had a boss that joked 50% of our advertising budget is wasted. The trouble is we don't know which 50%. And that might have been an old joke from somewhere else. I don't know, but
A lot of times, yeah.
I heard it from him, and I always was perplexed by that a little bit, but in those days there was less data. And so I think the other part of this, world in terms of technology and what's essential, the CRM is going to tell you a lot about how your marketing efforts are impacting what people do. Because a platform like HubSpot doesn't just allow you to contact people, and it doesn't just keep a record of when you contacted them and what you said to them. It also will show you, hey, Bill came to the landing page that we sent him and he did X, Y, and Z. He watched the video, he did this, he did that. It's time for us to follow up with Bill. You didn't know that sort of thing back, 15 years ago. So that's an important part of it. I think marketing automation, which we also use for HubSpot, is super important. It just frees you up. It allows you to do things strategically rather than reactively, which I also think is important for success. And then I also think another thing that, especially in the marketing department, project management is really important. There are a lot of different platforms that will do it. I personally have always liked Basecamp, and that's what the agency uses. We still use it. We really like it. But the right tools streamline everything, and it helps you keep focus on results. And I think as marketers, there's a lot of pressure on us to deliver results. And there's also, I think, a joy in it. Like, hey, this worked, and that's what we want, right? We want the thing that we're doing to actually work. It's not just to do things, right? We want results. The results make everybody happy.
And I think that's what some of the frustrations, from a business owner perspective, for quote unquote marketing is, sometimes it's associated just with advertising, and
Mhm.
there's no direct results. How do you know that people are seeing your ad, or seeing, maybe a billboard or a print ad somewhere, something like that? And I like your comment about the data back, getting that direct response of, do you know if that marketing that you're doing is working properly? And I think that's essential to making it successful, is having that data back into the system.
Yeah, and to be able to test, right? So to have some freedom with creativity to say, all right, we've got two messages that we're sort of thinking about. Let's A/B them. Let's see which one does better. And of course, there's lots of different ways to sell, and there's lots of different ways people buy things. Of course, with e-commerce, results are pretty easily tracked. It's kind of baked in at this point. You probably be pretty suspect of any business that was selling online and didn't know. right? How their data was actually working. So that's crucial. And there's still retail, and there's still, other ways to buy things. And so there's always going to be that. There's a certain amount of guesswork always. Particularly with retail, the retail supplier, manufacturer, retailer type, arrangement, or model. So B2B and then B2C. The B2B gets a little harder, right? I'm selling my products to retailers who are then going to sell them to the end user. But there's some really good software out there now that will allow you to track these sorts of things. And we've actually encouraged a number of our clients to build portals, which are similar to e-commerce, where their dealers can buy product on the site, and then, obviously the product ships to the retail site, and then they sell to the end user. And the portals are actually really useful because you can track your marketing the same as if you were an e-commerce company.
Interesting. I know that, and kind of wrapping this up around tools, the big thing right now is AI and incorporating AI into tools. I know HubSpot, for example, has incorporated some AI features into their tools. What are you seeing, the best way to use AI in marketing today?
I use it as an idea starter, number one. Like it doesn't matter what kind of creative I'm going to try to do. At this point, I'm probably going to go to AI and throw some ideas at it and see what it comes out with. I remember, when I was a copywriter, and, even when I was marketing director in charge of the copy, the blank page is really an intimidating thing. And, I would sit with product managers, and I would sit with research and development, and we would talk about all these things, in detail. And there was a lot that would, be created around, who is this for, and what do they do with it, right? And so those sorts of documents were really useful, but they weren't creative, right? They didn't come up with a catchy slogan or a message, or even like, a web page of copy that's going to explain why someone should, purchase this product over another one. So I think the number one thing that I use it for is just an idea generator. Like, give me 10 ideas around that. And I might not use a single one of them. In fact, I probably never will, but at least gets my creative juices going. And so I use it as a sounding board. I think AI also helps us analyze data. We were just talking about data. So, you can throw a spreadsheet in and have it analyze it and give you the insight that might have taken you hours to figure out. And sometimes I've seen it come up with suggestions that I might not have thought of, just looking at the data myself. So I think that's a really important part. I think micro-targeting is a really good thing that it'll do. If you say what the product is and you kind of give it a little bit of description, and then you say, who would you say are the target markets? Sometimes it'll surprise you, and give you one that you may not have thought of. So I think there's a lot of ways to use it. It doesn't replace creativity. It doesn't replace experience. It doesn't replace any of that. It's just another tool. My wife and I, my wife actually does a lot of work around AI, and she does workshops teaching people how to use it effectively in their jobs. And, we talk about it all the time. And, it just allows us to get the big idea. And that's what we're really paid to do as marketers, is get the big idea that's going to impact the bottom line. That's really what we're doing. So I'm not afraid of it. I'm not worried about it replacing me. And, I am old enough to remember when Google didn't exist, and email wasn't a thing. So to me, it's just another tool. Is it going to disrupt? Yeah, it is. And will some people think, oh, maybe I don't need quite so many people doing X, Y, or Z. I can just use a few to do the work with AI. I think there will be some disruption in that area, but I think on the whole, there will be more opportunity for people who know how to use it and use it effectively, and to increase their own productivity. I think that that's really where I think the AI technology really makes the biggest difference.
Yeah, it's certainly not something that we should be having it write all our content for us and sticking up on blog posts and whatever it may be. But I enjoy using AI too for, like you said, a sounding board, idea creation and just different aspects of the business. And it really helps bring that knowledge and that it has along with the stories and relevancy that as business owners and thought leaders need to incorporate together. So it is an interesting new tool, but it is just a tool. And kind of as we wrap up here, talk to me about what you think the biggest advice you would recommend for business owners that are feeling overwhelmed by, all the marketing technology, all the tools, whether they should go with AdWords or, you know, uh, authority marketing, direct response marketing. What are you, what advice would you give business owners that are feeling overwhelmed?
Well, depending on the size of the business, so that's always a big part of the conversation, right? Because that determines budget, and that determines a lot. But assuming that they've got some budget to play with and they're they're ready to do the work, right? So I have encountered companies that come to me, they're not really ready to do marketing. Like they're ready to do some marketing, but they're not really ready for a full on program yet. So I always say you need to start by understanding your audience, who they are, what they care about, and most importantly, what action you want them to take. And then once you've kind of worked that out, then you can go and look at the platforms. You know, is your audience spending a lot of its time on Instagram or Facebook, or do they spend a lot of time on TikTok? If you're looking at Gen Z as part of your market, they don't spend a lot of time on many of those platforms. Some are on TikTok, but there are other ones like Twitch and Steam and different things like that are Discord's another one. So there's a lot of platforms out there that are emerging, and we have to remember too, generationally, that teenagers and 20-year-olds don't want to be like their parents, so they don't want to be on the same platforms as their parents. So that's another thing that you have to contend with if that's part of your audience, is where do I reach those folks? So that's why I say it's really important to understand your audience before you think about any marketing, is who are they and where are they? I think that a lot of businesses jump into tactics without figuring out that foundation, and that can lead to a lot of wasted money and wasted effort. So we always try to do that work first when we meet somebody new that wants to work with us. Is we try to figure out, and if they don't know, we try to help them find out. Well, who is your market? Who's your audience? Who's buying your product? And then we try to scale and try to figure out, okay, where would we find them? And I'll say one other thing about how we approach it, and you probably have heard this, but there are different parts of the funnel as you go down that the platforms are better with. So Google, for example, is to us more bottom of the funnel, closer to conversion platform than a Facebook or Google Display or any of that. And the reason is because you have to know about the product in order to Google it, right? You can't search for a product if you don't know it exists.
Right.
So that's just kind of how that works. So we're always recommending, it's a stack of technology platforms that we want to use. If your audience is on Facebook, then yeah, we're absolutely going to recommend Facebook advertising, and Google will be at the bottom of the funnel, and that's where you'll see the conversion. But yeah, we actually recommend a multitude of platforms in order to reach the right people.
Excellent. Well, this has been a really intriguing conversation, Mark. I appreciate you joining us today. If people want to know more about you and your company, how can they find you?
Well, I'm happy to take an email from anybody who's watching this podcast right now. My email is mark, M-A-R-K, at wilder2, the number 2.com. And our website is wilder2.com. And if you go there, you will definitely be asked to sign up for a newsletter because we are all about HubSpot, and that's how that works. So you would be in our CRM immediately if you went and did that. So yeah, I would love to meet with folks and talk to them about their marketing challenges. I think you can tell how passionate I am about marketing. It's a really creative field, and I'm very fortunate to be working in it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Mark, and we'll make sure we include those links in our show notes. So again, thank you for joining us today at Stimulus Tech Talk, and join us next time as we talk about technology and how it affects our businesses. Have a great day.
Thanks, Nathan.